The night was the color of molten gold. Inside the amber lounge, chandeliers spilled light across marble floors, and Chicago's wealthiest dined, as if time itself waited for them to finish dessert. The room glowed with quiet power. Crystal laughter, murmured deals, and the gentle chime of cutlery that sounded almost rehearsed. Clara Reed moved through it like a ghost who had learned to smile. At 26, she had mastered invisibility, the delicate balance between presence and absence that made wealthy patrons forget she existed while remembering her service was flawless. Her red apron tied neatly around her waist, her hair pinned back with military precision. She carried a tray of champagne flutes to table 7, where the air always felt 10 degrees colder. Near the window, framed by the city lights reflected on the river, sat Margaret Pierce, matriarch of the Pierce family, elegant in a navy silk dress, pearls soft against her throat. Across from her, a younger woman scrolled through her phone with manicured indifference. Vanessa Pierce, the kind of beauty that looked expensive even when she wasn't trying. "More water, please," Margaret said softly, her voice barely above the hum of conversation. Clara turned, glass pitcher in hand, her polite smile automatic. "Of course, ma'am." As she poured, her eyes caught something, just a flicker, beneath the cuff of Margaret's cardigan. A faint bruise, yellow fading to blue, like the shadow of a storm that refused to pass. Clara's hand hesitated for a heartbeat. She'd seen bruises before, on friends who said they'd fallen, on strangers who avoided mirrors, but this was different. When she looked up, Margaret was watching her. Those pale gray eyes, calm, intelligent, pleading, held hers in quiet desperation. Then the older woman's lips moved. No sound, just 2 words shaped carefully. "Help me." Clara almost dropped the pitcher. The wordless plea sliced through the soft music and murmured laughter. She swallowed, forcing her breath steady. "Is everything all right with your meal, Mrs. Pierce?" she asked evenly, her tone smooth, professional. Before Margaret could answer, Vanessa looked up, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "Everything's fine. We'll take the check soon." Margaret's gaze didn't waver. Her hand resting near the napkin trembled slightly. She adjusted it, as if by accident, revealing more of the bruising. Then, almost imperceptibly, she tapped her index finger twice on the table, a rhythm too deliberate to be chance. Clara's pulse quickened. Years ago, she'd learned that fear had a language of its own. She was fluent in it. Vanessa leaned back, sighing. "Honestly, Mother Pierce, you really need to stop with these little dramas. We're in public." The older woman's lips tightened, the kind of silence that wasn't obedience but exhaustion. Clara filled the last of the water and stepped back. "If you need anything else, please let me know." Vanessa didn't look up. "We won't." As Clara turned away, the crystal chandelier above table 7 flickered slightly, a shimmer of gold on white linen. Her throat was dry, her thoughts loud. Maybe she'd misread it. Maybe the bruise was nothing. Maybe "help me" was imagination. But the tremor in Margaret's fingers, no, that wasn't imagined. Across the dining room, a server dropped a tray. Glass shattered. Guests gasped. For a moment, everyone looked away, everyone except Clara. At table 7, Margaret's hand moved, swift, deliberate. Her glass tipped, spilling water across the cloth, the sound startlingly loud. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Vanessa snapped, pushing back her chair. "Can you not manage a simple meal without a scene?" I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. The apology trembled, too practiced to be sincere. Clara was already there, napkin in hand. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'll take care of it." She knelt to blot the water, her heart racing. And as she leaned closer, Margaret's hand brushed hers, light, fragile. Something small pressed into Clara's palm, a folded piece of paper. Clara closed her fingers around it before Vanessa noticed. The younger woman rolled her eyes. "I swear, next time we're eating at home, with staff that actually pays attention." "I'll have a fresh tablecloth brought out," Clara said calmly, hiding the tremor in her voice. "Fine. And hurry," Vanessa muttered, already returning to her phone. Clara moved away, feeling the paper burn against her skin like a secret. Her steps carried her past the bar, past the polished mirrors where she caught her own reflection. Wide eyes, pale face, heart hammering beneath her apron. She slipped into the hallway leading to the staff area. The door swung shut behind her, muffling the laughter from the dining room. The paper unfolded with a faint crackle. Elegant handwriting, slightly unsteady, filled the small square. "She hurts me. Don't let me go home with her." Clara's stomach dropped. Her hands shook as she refolded the note. The words felt too heavy to hold, too urgent to ignore. She glanced at the clock. 8:42 p.m. The restaurant full, the noise still rising from beyond the door. And at one of those tables sat a woman begging for rescue in silence. For a moment, the familiar instinct whispered, "Stay out of it. Don't get involved. You can't afford another mistake." But then Clara remembered the cold nights 3 years ago, sleeping in her car, praying someone would see her, help her, notice she existed. She reached for her phone. The call connected fast. 911, what's your emergency? Her voice came out low but firm. This is Clara Reed. I'm a server at the Amber Lounge on West Ontario Street. I believe an elderly woman is in danger. She has visible bruising and passed me a note asking for help. Is she still with the person who may be harming her? Yes. Her name's Margaret Pierce. She's with her daughter-in-law, Vanessa Pierce. Ma'am, stay calm. Officers are en route. Do not confront them directly. I understand. Clara hung up, her hand trembling slightly. She exhaled, then straightened her apron, forcing her heartbeat back into rhythm. Back in the dining area, the room looked the same, glittering, perfect, untouched. No one noticed the storm quietly gathering at table 7. Vanessa smiled at something on her phone, oblivious. Margaret sat still, her hands folded neatly on the tablecloth, but her eyes, those quiet gray eyes, met Clara's again as she passed. In that look, Clara saw everything. The fear, the gratitude, and the desperate hope that someone, for once, would not look away. The chandelier swayed gently above them, scattering light like broken promises across polished glass. Somewhere outside, the wail of distant sirens began to rise, and Clara Reed, waitress, survivor, witness, kept moving through the golden glow of the Amber Lounge, carrying in her hand a secret that could unravel one of Chicago's most powerful families. The staff room of the Amber Lounge was small, windowless, and smelled faintly of coffee and lemon cleaner. Clara closed the door behind her, heart still hammering from what she'd just read. The note was open on the counter. She hurts me. Don't let me go home with her. She read it again, the letters trembling, as if written by a hand afraid of being caught. Her reflection in the metal coffee pot looked pale, almost foreign. You could pretend you never saw it, whispered a quiet voice inside her head. People like her have money, lawyers, power. You'll lose your job. But another voice, older and colder, answered, and if you stay silent, she might lose her life. Clara picked up her phone. Her fingers didn't shake when she dialed 911 this time. 911, what's your emergency? There's an elderly woman at the Amber Lounge, 165 West Ontario Street, Clara said quickly. Visible bruising on her wrist. She slipped me a note asking for help. She's with her daughter-in-law, Vanessa Pierce. There was a pause on the other end. You're sure she's in immediate danger? Yes. Please, send someone now. 2 units are on their way. Don't confront them directly. I understand. She hung up, took one deep breath, and slid the note into her apron pocket like evidence. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she walked back into the golden light of the dining room. The restaurant hadn't changed. The music still soft, the air still scented with butter and wine. But to Clara, everything felt sharper, more fragile. Every laugh, every clink of glass seemed too loud, like static before lightning. At table 7, Margaret Pierce sat exactly as before, calm, contained, her silver hair glowing under the chandelier. Vanessa scrolled on her phone, tapping her manicured nails impatiently. Clara approached slowly. Can I get you anything else this evening? Vanessa didn't look up. No, but you can bring the check. We're done. Yes, ma'am. As Clara turned toward the cashier's stand, her eyes flicked toward the front door. Through the glass, flashing red and blue lights painted the street. Her breath caught. 2 police officers stepped inside, one male, one female, both in dark navy uniforms, their expressions neutral but alert. They spoke quietly to the hostess. Then, the hostess pointed toward table 7. Vanessa's head snapped up. What is this? The officers approached. Mrs. Pierce, the woman officer asked evenly. We received a call about a possible welfare concern. Vanessa's eyes widened. Excuse me? Welfare concern? That's absurd. The male officer nodded politely. Ma'am, could we speak with your mother-in-law privately? Margaret's hands tightened in her lap. The tremor in her fingers returned, faint but visible. Vanessa laughed, a brittle sound. She's confused. My mother-in-law has early dementia. You know how that goes. One minute she's fine, the next she's imagining things. Mrs. Pierce, the female officer repeated gently, addressing Margaret now. "Would you like to talk somewhere quiet?" Margaret hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes, please." Vanessa's face flushed. "Mother Pierce, really? This is ridiculous. Tell them you're fine." But Margaret stood, her back straighter than before. "I'd like to go with them," she said softly. Clara stood behind the server station, trying not to breathe too loudly. The officers guided Margaret toward the exit. The restaurant had gone silent. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations stalled. Vanessa turned on Clara, her voice a hiss. Did you call them?" Clara froze. "I'm sorry, ma'am, I don't you dare lie to me." Vanessa's voice rose, drawing every eye in the room. "Do you have any idea who I am?" The manager, nervous and sweating, hurried over. "Mrs. Pierce, please, if we could step outside." Vanessa ignored him. "You people are finished. My husband owns half this block. This entire staff will be out of work by morning." Clara's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. "I just did what I thought was right." "Right?" Vanessa snapped. "You just humiliated my family in front of half of Chicago." "Ma'am," the male officer interjected firmly, "I'm going to ask you to remain seated until we've spoken with your husband." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "My husband is out of town. You'll regret this when he hears what you've done." The door opened behind them, and a gust of cold air swept in. A tall man in a gray suit stepped through, shoulders squared, expression carved from steel. His presence filled the room before he spoke a word. Julian Pierce. Conversations died instantly. Even the music seemed to lower itself in deference. He was handsome in a way that looked expensive, controlled, deliberate, eyes like gray glass under stormlight. The CEO of Pierce Global Systems, the man whose name appeared on magazine covers and charity galas. And at that moment he looked like someone who'd run out of patience with the world. "Vanessa," he said quietly, voice carrying across the room. "What's going on?" She blinked, her composure fracturing. "Julian, I didn't expect you tonight." Clearly. His gaze swept over the officers, the overturned glass, the shaken patrons. "Why are the police here?" Vanessa straightened, adopting a sweet, practiced tone. "There's been a misunderstanding. Your mother got confused again, and apparently one of the servers," she shot Clara a daggered glance, "overreacted." Julian turned his eyes on Clara. The air between them tightened. Clara stood tall, though every nerve screamed to look away. "Sir, your mother appeared distressed. She passed me a note asking for help." A murmur rippled through the diners. Someone gasped softly. Julian's face remained unreadable. "May I see the note?" Clara reached into her apron, unfolded the small paper, and handed it to him. The silence around them was total. He read it once, then again. His jaw clenched, the muscle beneath his cheek twitched. When he finally looked up, his gaze wasn't cold, it burned. "Vanessa," he said, voice low, "how long?" She blinked. "How long what?" "How long have you been hurting my mother?" The words landed like thunder. Vanessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You can't possibly believe. Julian, she's confused. Look at her. But Julian had already turned to the officers. "Please take my mother somewhere safe. I'll handle the rest." The female officer nodded. "We'll escort her to the hospital, Mr. Pierce." As they guided Margaret out, she passed Clara's station. For a fleeting second, their eyes met again. The older woman mouthed, "Thank you." Vanessa's fury reignited. "You did this," she hissed at Clara. "You'll regret it." Julian faced her. "Enough. We'll discuss this at home. Actually, no, not at home." His voice cut cleanly through the air. "Security will show you out." Vanessa's mask shattered. "Julian, you're making a spectacle." He didn't look at her again. "You already did." Two security guards approached quietly. Vanessa backed away, whispering threats under her breath, but her power was gone. Julian stood still for a long moment, the note still in his hand. Around him, the restaurant began to breathe again, slowly, uncertainly. Clara didn't move. She could feel every heartbeat, every pair of eyes watching. Finally, Julian turned to her. "You called them?" "Yes," she said softly. "I did." For the first time, his expression shifted. Something unreadable, a mixture of grief and relief. "You may have just saved my mother's life." Clara exhaled, only then realizing she'd been holding her breath. Outside, the sirens faded into distance, leaving only the sound of rain beginning to fall against the glass. Inside the amber lounge, the golden glow seemed dimmer now, as if even the chandeliers understood that something irreversibly human had just cracked open among the perfection. And for Clara Reed, the night that began with a whisper had just become a storm. The note hung between Julian's fingers like something radioactive. Its edges trembled slightly under the chandelier's glow, and yet his face remained unnervingly calm. The handwriting was unmistakable. He had seen it on birthday cards, shopping lists, notes left on his desk when he was too busy to eat. His mother's elegant cursive. For a long, unbearable second, he didn't speak. The restaurant held its breath. Then, quietly, he turned to the officers. Take her to the hospital, full examination, and make sure she's somewhere safe. Margaret nodded once, her composure fragile but intact. Thank you, she whispered to no one in particular, perhaps to herself, perhaps to the stranger who had believed her. Vanessa's face twisted. Julian, you can't be serious. You're humiliating your own family. He looked at her, and his voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. My family? You've mistaken yourself for that word. A ripple of whispers moved through the diners. Phones hovered discreetly. Someone at the bar pretended to check their messages while recording. Julian's next words fell like a quiet blade. This marriage is over. For a moment, Vanessa seemed not to hear him. Then color drained from her face. Over? Because of a delusional old woman and a waitress? You're ending everything over this circus? He didn't answer. He simply folded the note and slipped it into his jacket pocket. You'll have your lawyer call mine tomorrow. Security will escort you home tonight. To your own address, not mine. The word home carried an authority that left no room for argument. Vanessa's composure cracked. You can't. Julian, think about the press. Think about the shareholders. I'm thinking about my mother, he said, something you never did. His tone wasn't raised, but it carried. Every person in the restaurant heard it. Vanessa turned on Clara, eyes burning with fury. You little fraud. You think this makes you some kind of hero? You just destroyed a marriage. Do you realize that? Clara forced herself to hold Vanessa's stare. If saving someone from abuse destroys a marriage, maybe it needed to be destroyed. Gasps echoed softly from nearby tables. Vanessa's hand twitched like she wanted to strike her, but one of the security guards stepped forward. Ma'am, let's go. She jerked her arm away, trembling with rage. You'll regret this, all of you. Her heels clicked furiously across the marble, the sound slicing through the silence. Then the doors closed behind her, and the room exhaled. The officers led Margaret gently toward the exit. As she passed Clara, she paused. For the first time, she seemed taller, steadier. You did the right thing, she said softly. Don't ever doubt that. Clara managed a faint nod. Her throat was too tight for words. When they were gone, Julian remained standing beside the empty table. The water glass Margaret had, spilled, still lay on its side, a small puddle glistening like a stain of truth. He looked down at it for a long time, the weight of what had just happened pressed against the air. Finally, he spoke without looking up. Everyone, please continue your evening. The bill for table 7 is covered. The staff hesitated. The guests whispered. Slowly, life trickled back into motion. Forks lifted, music resumed, voices rose again, though quieter than before. Clara gathered herself and returned to her duties. Her hands shook slightly as she wiped down another table. She could still feel Vanessa's glare, still hear the echo of her threats. Her manager approached, whispering, You okay? Clara nodded, even though she wasn't. I'll finish the section. He looked at her with something between pride and worry. That was brave, Clara. Stupid, but brave. When she reached for a cloth to dry table 7, Julian was still there. The note was gone, but the tension hadn't followed it. He spoke quietly, almost to himself. I didn't want to believe it. Clara looked up. No one ever does, until they have to. His eyes met hers then, not as a man accustomed to being obeyed, but as a son who had just realized how blind he'd been. She's been quieter lately, he said. Stopped visiting the office. Vanessa said she was tired. I thought it was just age. Clara's voice softened. Abuse hides best behind what looks like care. He exhaled slowly, the breath of someone who hadn't done that in a long time. You could have ignored it. Most people would have. I tried to once, she said. It didn't end well. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe? Or the first fragile spark of respect. I owe you, he said. You don't owe me anything, she replied. I just did what anyone should. He gave a small, disbelieving smile. Then maybe I've been spending time with the wrong kind of people. They stood there for a few quiet seconds while servers hurried past, avoiding eye contact. Clara folded the damp napkin into her tray, but her heartbeat refused to slow. Julian straightened, slipping his hands into his pockets. I'll have my office contact the restaurant about a statement. There'll be press interest after tonight. Clara frowned. Press? My wife, he caught himself. Ex-wife, has friends in media. They'll twist this however they can. I'll make sure your name isn't dragged into it. I can handle myself, she said. He tilted his head slightly, as if assessing that. I don't doubt it, but let me do this one decent thing. She hesitated, then nodded. Thank you. He glanced around the dining room one last time, the same way a man might look at a battlefield after the smoke clears. If it weren't for you, he said, I wouldn't have a mother to thank tomorrow. The simplicity of it broke something inside her. She wanted to say something, to deflect with professionalism, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she just whispered, I'm glad she's safe. Julian nodded once, as if that was all that mattered. Then he walked toward the door, his reflection moving past the amber lights, each step heavy with a man's reckoning. When he was gone, the space he'd occupied seemed to hold the echo of his presence, the sharp scent of rain, the gravity of silence, the faint shimmer of a life abruptly changed. Clara wiped the last traces of water from the table. The linen was spotless now, but she could still see where the glass had fallen, where fear had turned into courage. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket, a text from her manager. You did good tonight, don't worry about tomorrow. We'll figure it out. She typed back one word. Thanks. Then she looked around the dining room one last time. The chandeliers glowed again, pretending nothing had happened. But under their polished light, Clara knew everything had changed, for Margaret, for Julian, and maybe for herself too. Because sometimes the biggest storms don't start with thunder. They start with a single whisper heard by someone brave enough to listen. Outside the Amber Lounge, Chicago's night had teeth. Rain drizzled from a pewter sky, slicking the sidewalks and turning the streetlights into long ribbons of gold that trembled on the pavement. The air smelled faintly of wet concrete and exhaust, the kind of cold that crept through seams and sleeves no matter how tight you wrapped your coat. Clara Reed stepped out into it, exhaling steam. Her shift was over, but her heartbeat still hadn't slowed. She could still see the empty table, the spilled water, the look in Julian Pierce's eyes when he realized what had been happening under his own roof. She tugged her coat tighter and started walking toward the train station. Her sneakers slapped softly against the wet sidewalk. Clara? She froze. The voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Julian stood under a streetlight, a gray umbrella tilted loosely over his shoulder, his jacket undone. The rain had already dampened his hair, softening the edges of the CEO everyone in Chicago feared and respected. He looked nothing like the man who had dominated the restaurant hours earlier. He looked human, tired, haunted, and lost. I didn't mean to startle you, he said quietly. I just wanted to see if you were all right. Clara blinked. I should be asking you that. You just set your life on fire. His lips curved faintly, though it wasn't quite a smile. Sometimes fire's the only way to see what's left that's real. She studied him for a beat. Your mother's safe? She's at Northwestern Medical. I'll see her in the morning. His voice roughened slightly. I owe you for that. You don't owe me anything, Clara said automatically. Then at least let me buy you coffee, he offered. A proper thank you, no press, no business, just a cup of something warm before we both collapse. Rain pattered gently between them. Clara hesitated. She had rules for herself, boundaries built from mistakes. No late-night invitations, no powerful men, no blurred lines. And yet there was something in Julian's face tonight, an exhaustion so raw it almost looked like honesty. She sighed. Fine, one coffee, then I disappear back into my very ordinary life. He gestured down the street. There's a diner a block from here. They make terrible pie but decent cappuccinos. She raised a brow. You're selling this really well. For the first time that night, he laughed, a short, low sound that made the rain seem softer. It's the best I've got. The diner sat on the corner, its neon sign buzzing faintly through the drizzle, open all night. Inside, the warmth hit instantly. Grease, sugar, and the faint hum of old jazz through cheap speakers. A waitress with gray hair and kind eyes led them to a booth by the window. Julian ordered 2 coffees without asking. Clara didn't protest. They sat in silence at first, the rain tapping on the glass beside them, like a metronome for the quiet. Outside, The street shimmered. Inside, the coffee steamed. Julian stirred his cup with the spoon, eyes fixed on the swirl of cream. "It's strange," he said finally, "how quickly a life can pivot. This morning I was worried about quarterly reports. Tonight I'm wondering how many times my mother hid bruises I never saw." Clara clasped her hands around her mug. People get good at hiding pain, especially from the ones they think won't listen. He looked up, and for the first time, his gaze didn't feel heavy. "You saw what I didn't. Why?" "Because I used to be invisible too," she said quietly. "You learn to notice others who are." He didn't interrupt, didn't even move, so she went on, surprising herself. 3 years ago, I worked in marketing. Big firm, nice office, fiancé in the same department. Everyone thought I had it figured out. Then one morning, I walked in and found out he'd emptied our joint account, stolen my clients, and told everyone I was unstable, claimed I'd had some sort of breakdown. Julian's eyes darkened. And people believed him. Of course they did. She smiled bitterly. He had charm and a better lawyer. I had a panic attack in a boardroom. Guess who wins that story? She traced a drop of condensation down her cup. By the time the truth started to unravel, it was too late. My reputation was gone. I couldn't get hired. So I served coffee, washed dishes, waited tables. It was the only place that didn't Google me. For a moment, the only sound was the rain outside and the faint clatter from the kitchen. Julian leaned back, exhaling. "I can't decide if that makes you the unluckiest person I've met tonight or the bravest." "Neither," Clara said. "Just someone who ran out of options and kept moving anyway." His gaze lingered on her. "You could have looked away tonight. Most people would have." She shrugged. "I just didn't want another regret." He studied her face as though trying to memorize it. "You remind me of my mother." Clara blinked. "That's not the compliment you think it is." A small laugh escaped him. "No, I mean, her strength. She ran Pierce Global when my father died. Half the board that tried to push her out. She fought them off one by one. She sounds remarkable. She is. I just forgot that for a while." He looked down at his untouched pie, then pushed it toward her. "You should try this. It's terrible, but it grows on you." She smirked. "That's how you describe yourself too?" He chuckled softly. "Fair." They ate in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward. It was the silence of two people who didn't need to fill the air just to feel seen. At one point, a siren wailed somewhere distant. Both of them turned toward the window automatically. The rain had softened into a mist. Streetlights blurred in the reflection. Julian spoke again, quieter now. "You know, I don't really do this." "Do what?" "Talk to people who don't want something from me." Clara tilted her head. "And what exactly do you think I want?" "Nothing," he said simply. "That's why it feels different." For the first time that night, she smiled. An actual, unguarded smile. "You're really bad at small talk, you know that?" He laughed under his breath. "You're not the first to mention it." They lingered until the waitress refilled their cups twice. Outside, the streets grew quieter. The neon light flickered across their table, painting the air in soft red and blue. When the clock above the counter struck midnight, Clara stood. "I should go. Early shift tomorrow." Julian rose too, pulling out his wallet. She waved him off. "I can pay for my own coffee." "I know," he said, "but let me. This once." He left cash on the table, and they stepped back into the cool, damp air. The city was half asleep, just rain, reflections, and the low hum of traffic far away. They walked together toward the train station. No words this time, just footsteps and the faint rhythm of rain on metal roofs. At the corner, Clara stopped. "This is me." Julian nodded. "Thank you for staying." "Thank you for asking." He hesitated, then extended his hand. When she took it, his grip was warm despite the chill. "I don't know what tomorrow looks like," he said, "but if it ever includes coffee again, I'd like it to be with you." Clara smiled, small and genuine. "We'll see, Mr. Pierce." And then she turned, descending the steps to the platform. The wind carried the faint scent of rain and roasted coffee as the train lights approached from the tunnel below. Julian stood on the sidewalk, watching until she disappeared. For the first time in years, he didn't check his phone, didn't think about shareholders or headlines. He just listened to the city, the rain, and the quiet realization that maybe tonight wasn't an ending at all. Maybe it was the start of something unscripted. The cafe had thinned out by the time the rain softened into mist. A faint hum of jazz drifted from the dusty speaker above the counter, the kind that made the night feel slower, more honest. Outside, the neon sign flickered red and blue over the window pane, reflecting in the puddles that stretched down the street. Clara and Julian sat opposite each other, 2 cups of coffee cooling between them, their reflections trembling in the glass. Julian was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that came after years of shouting at boardrooms and hearing only echoes. "I built a fortress," he said, "a company, a reputation, a life that looked perfect from the outside. And somewhere in all that glass and steel, I left my mother behind." Clara didn't respond right away. She'd heard confessions before, most of them empty, rehearsed. But this one came raw, heavy with the kind of guilt that didn't perform for sympathy. He went on, staring into his cup. "After my father died, she kept the company running. I thought taking over would be honoring her legacy, but the truth is, I just wanted to stop feeling powerless. I worked, and every time she called, I told myself I'd visit next week. There was always another meeting, another deal." He let out a shaky breath. "And while I was out saving the company, she was being hurt in my own house." The words fractured, just a little. He didn't wipe the moisture in his eyes, but Clara saw it catch in the neon glow. "You didn't know," she said softly. "I didn't look." He met her gaze, and the sincerity there was unbearable. Sometimes not knowing feels easier than finding out you failed the one person who believed in you. The air between them felt still, alive with the hum of something unspoken. Clara's voice was steady. "You're not the only one who's ignored the wrong signs." Julian tilted his head, as if giving her permission to continue. She smiled faintly, though it wasn't joy, it was muscle memory. "You asked me earlier how I recognized her signal. It's because I know what it looks like when someone's screaming without sound." Julian frowned slightly. "You've seen it?" "I've lived it." Her gaze drifted toward the window where the city lights blurred in streaks of gold. 3 years ago, I was engaged to a man named Derek. We worked at the same firm, marketing, corporate clients, the whole expensive lie. We had plans to start our own agency. I thought I was building a future. She paused, her hands wrapped around the cup, absorbing its last traces of warmth. Then, one Monday morning, I walked into the office and my security badge didn't work. I thought it was a glitch. It wasn't. Julian didn't move. His attention didn't wander. He listened like he owed her that much. "Turns out," she continued, "Derek had transferred client files to his personal drive. Then he told HR that I'd been suffering from emotional instability, that I was sabotaging projects. He even produced fake emails, written from my account, showing me sending angry rants to clients." Julian's jaw tightened. "And they believed him." "They did. Why wouldn't they?" He smiled more, wore better suits. Clara's tone was detached, as if the only way to tell the story was to speak it like it belonged to someone else. "I lost everything in 48 hours. Job, savings, apartment, reputation. My friends disappeared one by one. Nobody wants to stand next to a scandal." The rain started again outside, tapping softly against the glass like a hesitant apology. Julian's voice dropped. "What happened to him?" "He opened the agency we planned together, used my ideas, my network, my name, well, what was left of it. He even got a magazine feature about being the youngest innovator in Chicago." Clara's smile was thin. "I watched it on my phone, sitting in my car with an empty tank, eating dollar store crackers." Julian's throat worked, but no sound came out. "For a few months," she said, "I was too ashamed to go home, to call anyone. I'd walk into restaurants like this, looking for warmth more than food. Eventually, I started serving tables instead of sitting at them." The neon light flickered, painting her face in pale crimson. She looked up at him. "So, when your mother looked at me tonight, I knew that look, the one that says, 'Please see me before I disappear.'" Julian leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You didn't just see her, you listened. That's more than most people do." Clara shrugged. "Listening doesn't fix everything." "No," he agreed, "but it can save something." Their eyes met again, his steady, hers wary. Two people bound not by circumstance, but by the silent understanding of what it means to lose your voice and then find it again. The waitress refilled their cups and left without a word. The scent of coffee drifted between them. Julian finally said, "I don't think you realize how extraordinary that was, what you did tonight." "It wasn't extraordinary. It was necessary." Necessary and brave aren't mutually exclusive. Clara looked down, tracing the rim of her cup. You give me too much credit. And you give yourself too little. She didn't answer, but her eyes softened just enough for him to know the words had landed. After a while, he asked, Are you still in contact with him, Derek? She shook her head. No. I changed numbers, moved across the city. I figured anonymity was safer than starting over. You don't strike me as someone meant to stay invisible. She huffed a quiet laugh. Invisible people rarely get a choice. Julian leaned back, watching her for a long moment. You should tell your story someday. Why? Because truth like that doesn't just expose villains. It reminds the rest of us we're not alone in failing or surviving. Clara's smile was faint but real this time. That sounds like a line from one of your company's speeches. He chuckled. I'm better with numbers than feelings, I admit. Well, she said, finishing her coffee, you're improving. Outside, the rain eased to a soft drizzle, and a taxi passed, splashing water that glowed under the neon. Julian glanced at his watch, then back at her. It's late. Yeah. She stood, pulling her coat close again. Thanks for the coffee, and for listening. He rose too. Thank you for seeing what no one else did. As they stepped outside, the city breathed around them, wet, shimmering, alive. Clara turned toward the train stop, her reflection doubling in every rain puddle. Julian stood for a moment beneath the neon sign, watching her fade into the mist. For the first time in years, the guilt in his chest felt lighter, replaced by something he hadn't expected. A flicker of gratitude, and the unsettling sense that this stranger might have changed more than just his night. The rain had long since stopped. Chicago looked almost forgiving under the pale blue of late morning. The city that once felt heavy now glimmered, windows catching sunlight, the river cutting clean through downtown like a sheet of glass. Clara Reed sat at a small cafe table, scrolling absently through job listings on her phone. None of them felt right. None of them felt possible. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Miss Reed? The voice was familiar, calm, cultured, slightly husky with age. This is Margaret Pierce. Clara straightened in her seat. Mrs. Pierce, how are you? Recovering, the older woman replied. The doctors insist I rest, but I find rest overrated. I was wondering if you might join me for tea this afternoon. There's something I'd like to discuss. In person. Clara blinked, surprised. Of course. When and where? I'll send a car for you at 2. Dress comfortably. I'm not interviewing you. Yet. The line clicked dead before Clara could respond. 2 hours later, she found herself standing in the marble foyer of the Riverview Residences, one of the most exclusive buildings along the Chicago River. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls framed the skyline like moving artwork. Margaret Pierce opened the door herself, a small defiance that startled Clara. Mrs. Pierce, you didn't have to— Oh, nonsense, Margaret interrupted with a smile. If I wait for someone to do things for me, I'll fossilize before dinner. Come in. Clara followed her into a living room bathed in soft daylight. Pale cream furniture, towering bookshelves, a vase of white lilies filling the air with quiet perfume. From the balcony, the river sparkled below, slicing through the heart of the city. Margaret gestured to the table set near the window. Sit. Tea's already rebelling against its pot. Clara smiled despite herself. This view is incredible. I bought this place years ago because I thought the river would calm me. Turns out, it mostly reflected my mistakes back at me. Margaret's tone was dry, but her eyes softened. Sugar? Just one, thank you. As they poured, the silence between them was comfortable, the kind of stillness that didn't need explaining. After a sip, Margaret set her cup down. You know, Miss Reed, I've been thinking about you quite a lot since that night. I'm glad you're okay, Clara said gently. Okay is relative, Margaret replied. Physically, I'm fine. Emotionally, I'm realizing how long I mistook survival for strength. She leaned back, fingers interlaced. I spent decades building Pierce Global. I thought power meant keeping everything in control, the business, my son, even my own image. But I see now, the strongest thing I ever did was ask for help. And you were the one who listened. Clara's throat tightened. Anyone would have, Margaret chuckled. No, my dear. I've been anyone to plenty of people in my lifetime. They all looked away. She studied Clara with the sharpness of someone used to reading balance sheets and souls alike. Julian tells me you worked in marketing before fate, or fools, redirected your career path. Clara blinked. He mentioned that? He mentioned you. Margaret smiled knowingly. And I did a little digging. You had quite the portfolio, until your former partner decided to make you his scapegoat. Clara shifted, uneasy. That was a long time ago. 3 years is yesterday when injustice is involved, Margaret said simply. Which brings me to why you're here. Clara frowned. I'm listening. Margaret leaned forward slightly, her voice lowering into the calm precision of a woman who once ran empires. Pierce Global is a machine, efficient, powerful, but soulless lately. Julian's trying to rebuild its ethics after years of sterile profit chasing. What it needs now isn't another executive. She paused, eyes narrowing with a hint of mischief. It needs a conscience. Clara blinked, unsure. And you think I know you, Margaret said. You have lived on both sides of power, privilege and struggle. You understand perception, truth, and the cost of silence. I want you to serve as a communications advisor, temporary at first. Focus on community engagement, charitable outreach, employee morale. Remind this company that people still matter. Clara froze, unsure whether to laugh or panic. Mrs. Pierce, I haven't worked in that world for years. I'm a waitress now. Nonsense, Margaret waved a hand dismissively. Titles don't expire. Talent doesn't disappear because life got inconvenient. Clara's pulse quickened. Even if I agreed, your board would never approve. They'd see my name and... They'll see my name above yours, Margaret cut in sharply. And that still counts for something. The steel in her voice made Clara smile. You don't take no easily, do you? Only when it's coming from someone who means it. Clara hesitated, then sighed. I appreciate the offer, I really do, but I don't know if I can walk back into that world. It nearly broke me. Margaret's expression softened, but her eyes stayed firm. Then maybe it's time to show that world what it made you into. Clara looked away, watching the sunlight ripple across the river. I'm not sure I'm ready. My dear, Margaret said, voice lowering to something almost tender. Do you think I was ready the night I asked a stranger for help? Courage doesn't wait for readiness. It arrives when you least deserve it, and you either answer or you don't. Clara turned back, meeting the older woman's gaze. Sometimes, Margaret added, smiling faintly, opportunity doesn't knock. It calls the name of the one brave enough to stand up. The words landed with quiet gravity, the kind that didn't demand an answer right away but planted a seed that would not die. After a long silence, Clara whispered, If I say yes, it'll be because of you, not because I believe I belong there. Margaret reached across the table, her hands steady and warm. Then we'll make you believe it. They sat there for a moment, sunlight brushing across their faces. Outside, the river flowed unbothered, steady, unhurried, like time itself forgiving what it could. When Clara finally left the apartment, the city seemed brighter, the air lighter. She didn't know if she'd accept the offer yet, but something had shifted. The faint but certain pull of a life trying to begin again. And somewhere behind those high windows, Margaret Pierce smiled to herself, sipping the last of her tea. For the first time in years, she felt like a mother again. Not to a corporation, but to something much rarer, a spark she thought she'd lost. Night had folded itself over Chicago, heavy and electric. In the corner of an upscale downtown bar, the kind with smoked mirrors and overpriced whiskey, Vanessa Pierce sat beneath the blue glow of a flat-screen TV. Her manicured fingers tightened around a glass of wine as the newscaster's voice echoed faintly across the room. In a remarkable act of courage, a young waitress named Clara Reed helped rescue Margaret Pierce, mother of CEO Julian Pierce, from an alleged case of domestic abuse. Sources report that the investigation is ongoing. The image of Clara filled the screen, smiling awkwardly, captured by a passing customer's photo. Vanessa's eyes burned. Hero, she muttered, swirling the wine. That's what they call her now. The bartender shot her a glance, the kind that said, I've seen too many like you tonight, then turned away. Vanessa's reflection in the mirror looked almost unrecognizable. Perfect curls, immaculate makeup, but eyes hollowed out by fury. For the past week, she'd been painted as the villain of Chicago's favorite morality play, the cruel daughter-in-law, the abuser, the disgrace of the Pierce name. Her lawyers had warned her to stay silent. Her friends stopped returning calls. Even the designer who used to beg her for endorsements now politely claimed scheduling conflicts. But silence, Vanessa decided, was for the defeated. And she had no intention of staying defeated. Her phone buzzed. The name on the screen made her smile, a sharp, bitter thing. Derek Vaughn. An hour later, he walked into the same bar. The years hadn't been kind to him. Once the golden boy of Chicago's marketing scene, Derek now wore his decline like a second suit, expensively tailored but frayed at the edges. He slid into the booth across from her, forcing a smirk. "Vanessa Pierce, the last time I saw you, you were hosting a gala at the Conrad. What happened? Charity run out of causes?" Vanessa didn't flinch. "And the last time I saw you, you were on the cover of Business Midwest, the visionary marketer. Tell me, Derek, do visionaries usually beg banks to extend their credit lines?" His grin faltered, if only for a second. "You did your homework." "I always do." She leaned back, crossing her legs. "We're both less than we used to be, which is exactly why we understand each other." Derek signaled for a drink. "Go on." Vanessa took out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen glowed a news headline. "Waitress turned hero, Clara Reed's courage saves billionaire's mother." The photo beneath it, Clara in her red apron, standing shyly under the warm lights of the amber lounge. Derek's face froze. "You know her," Vanessa said. It wasn't a question. His jaw clenched. "I did, a long time ago." "Engaged, weren't you?" "Once." "Until you stole her clients, ruined her career, and left her for dead." Vanessa's tone was almost admiring, impressive in its cruelty. Derek didn't respond. His silence was confirmation enough. Vanessa leaned closer, her perfume sweet but sharp. "What if I told you we could both have what we've lost? You get your reputation back, and I get my life back." Derek snorted. "And what does that have to do with Clara Reed?" "She's the reason I lost everything," Vanessa hissed, her polished composure cracking. "That little act of charity, her call to 911, made me a monster overnight. I can't walk into a room without someone whispering. My marriage, my social circle, my career, all gone." Derek tilted his glass. "Maybe don't rough up the elderly next time." Her eyes flashed. "You believe that story?" "I believe the evidence." She leaned in closer, voice low and venomous. "Evidence is just storytelling with better PR, and you and I both know how to rewrite a story." Derek's expression shifted, curiosity laced with greed. "What are you proposing?" "I'm proposing a partnership," she said smoothly. "You have her past, I have the media contacts. Together we bury the saint act she's selling the city." He studied her carefully. "You think people will believe us? She's a hero right now." "Heroes don't stay heroes when skeletons start dancing," Vanessa replied. "You said she had a breakdown once, right? That's what you told her old firm?" He smirked faintly. "More than once." "Perfect," Vanessa said. "We'll feed that back into circulation." A few well-timed leaks, an anonymous insider claiming her heroism was a publicity stunt, a pattern of instability. She leaned forward, eyes glittering. "I'll make her look like what she really is, a desperate nobody clawing for relevance." Derek tapped his glass thoughtfully. "And what's in it for me?" "A second chance," she said simply. "I can get you a meeting with Delmar and Grant. They're about to reopen their advertising contract with Pierce Global. I still have friends on the board." Derek's gaze sharpened. "That's a multi-million-dollar deal. And I can make sure your name is on the proposal, if you help me." He considered it for a moment, watching the condensation trail down his glass. "So, you want me to fabricate the evidence again? Fake reports, emails, maybe an HR memo about her emotional instability?" Vanessa smiled thinly. "You already know the script. Just dust it off." He chuckled bitterly. "You're dangerous." "I'm desperate," she corrected. "Desperate people are better at being dangerous." For a while, they just sat in silence. Two broken egos reflected in the bar's polished glass, both too proud to admit how far they'd fallen. Finally, Derek lifted his glass. "To partnership." Vanessa's eyes met his. "To redemption," she said sweetly. Their glasses clinked, crystal against crystal, hollow and sharp. From the TV above, Clara's face appeared again, smiling awkwardly beside a photo of Julian Pierce. The chyron read, "Pierce Global confirms, CEO's mother recovering, investigation ongoing." Vanessa's gaze lingered on the screen, her lips curling. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, darling. They'll burn faster than you think. Derek smirked, pulling out his phone. Send me what you've got. I'll start building the file tonight. Good boy, she murmured, finishing her wine. He raised an eyebrow. You talk like you're running the show. I am, Vanessa said, standing to leave. You just don't realize it yet. As she walked out, the blue light from the TV washed over her, bleaching the warmth from her face. Derek watched her go, a flicker of doubt passing across his features, but only for a second. He unlocked his phone, opening a folder labeled Reed 20, filled with old files and ghosts. Outside, Vanessa's heels clicked against the wet pavement as she dialed another number. When the voice on the other end answered, she said softly, "He's in." And in the distance, thunder rolled over Lake Michigan, the sound of two storms about to collide. The glass tower of Pierce Global gleamed like a blend under the late morning sun. To most of Chicago, it was a monument, 30 floors of success, precision, and power. To Clara Reed, it was the last place she ever imagined herself walking into again. Her reflection stretched across the polished doors as she stepped inside. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and glass, calm, expensive, intimidating, a place where whispers move faster than footsteps. As the receptionist checked her badge, Clara caught the glances. Curious, skeptical, faintly judgmental. Everyone had seen the headlines. Waitress saves CEO's mother. From aprons to boardrooms, the Pierce redemption story. She could almost hear their thoughts. Why her? Who is she to walk among us? The elevator chimed softly. When the doors opened on the 24th floor, Julian Pierce was waiting. He wasn't in his usual CEO armor, no tie, sleeves rolled to the forearm, posture easy but focused. The faint smile he gave her wasn't corporate, it was human. "Welcome to Pierce Global, Ms. Reed," he said quietly. She smiled back, steady though her heart raced. "Thank you for taking a chance." "Not a chance," he said. "A correction." Before she could respond, another voice called out. Brisk, warm, unmistakably authoritative. "Ah, there's our new spark of integrity." Margaret Pierce approached with her usual poise, a pale blue scarf draped around her shoulders, her cane tapping gently against the tile. She looked better, color in her cheeks, light in her eyes. "Everyone," she said, addressing the small crowd of department heads gathering nearby, "this is Clara Reed, the woman who reminded me that silence isn't strength. She'll be helping us realign Pierce Global's community initiatives, because, as it turns out, doing the right thing isn't bad for business." The room was polite, applause that was more cautious than enthusiastic. But in a company built on polished facades, cautious was a start. Margaret gave Clara a knowing glance and murmured, "Don't mind the frost. It melts eventually." By noon, Clara was seated in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the river, surrounded by department leads and interns who looked at her as though she'd walked in from another planet. She began her presentation, fingers steady over the trackpad. "Pierce Global has influence," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Real, measurable influence. The kind that can change how this city sees itself. I want to build a homeless transition initiative, a program that connects our logistics partners, local restaurants, and housing nonprofits. It won't just donate money, it'll build bridges." A skeptical man in a gray suit, the operations director, if she remembered correctly, raised an eyebrow. "We're a technology firm, Ms. Reed, not a charity." Clara met his gaze. "Then it's time we prove the two can coexist. Because the difference between innovation and compassion is just a decision away." The silence that followed wasn't disagreement, it was surprise. Julian, seated quietly at the end of the table, was the first to clap, slow, deliberate, then Margaret joined, then others followed. When the meeting ended, Julian lingered as the others filed out. "That was bold," he said, almost amused. "I wasn't sure it would land." "It landed," he said. "Hard, which is exactly what this place needed." Clara smiled, a faint blush creeping into her cheeks. "I'm glad I didn't trip over my own words." "You didn't trip," Julian said softly. "You belonged." Before she could answer, Margaret appeared at the door, eyes sparkling. "Lunch, the both of you, before I forget what sunlight looks like." Clara laughed. "Yes, ma'am," Margaret winked. "Good girl. I like that you say ma'am. It reminds me I'm not dead yet." But by the time the sun started to sink behind the skyline, the warmth of that first day had already started to fade. It began with a notification, a soft ping from Clara's company tablet, then another and another, her inbox filled with links. At first, she ignored them, assuming they were routine press inquiries, but then she saw the subject line repeated in bold across every message, from waitress to director, inside Clara Reed's questionable rise. Her stomach turned cold. She clicked one. The article was sleek, professional, too professional. Multiple sources confirmed that Clara Reed, recently appointed as communications advisor at Pierce Global, was previously terminated from a marketing firm after documented emotional instability and erratic behavior. Insiders allege that her relationship with CEO Julian Pierce fast-tracked her position at the company. Photos accompanied the text, grainy but real. Her old corporate ID badge, a blurred picture outside her former office, even a doctored email screenshot implying misconduct. Clara felt her breath shorten. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass wall, pale, shocked, trembling. She scrolled to the end of the article. A final line read, Pierce Global declined to comment. Outside her office, the chatter of the staff had shifted, the kind of silence that isn't empty but listening. In the hallway, two junior analysts pretended to review a report but kept sneaking glances at her. Someone's whisper cracked like glass. Did you see the story? She was fired for mental issues. Clara closed her laptop slowly, her fingers shaking. She tried to steady her breathing. Don't let them see it. Don't give them what they want. But inside, a single question echoed louder than the noise. Who did this? Julian's office door was half open when she arrived. He was standing near the window, speaking to someone on the phone. I don't care what the press says, he said sharply. Find out who fed them that story, and how they got her records. He noticed Clara in the doorway, his expression shifting from fury to concern. You saw it. She nodded, her voice quiet. They're calling me unstable. They even have my old ID photo. Margaret entered behind her, her cane tapping like punctuation. Then someone's been digging deep. Those files should have been sealed. Clara swallowed hard. I know who could have had them. Julian's eyes narrowed. Who? My ex, Derek Vaughn. He used to work at the same firm. He's the one who... She stopped herself, exhaling. He's the one who destroyed me before. Julian's jaw tightened. Then this isn't coincidence. It's sabotage. Margaret placed a firm hand on Clara's shoulder. And sabotage, my dear, is a compliment from cowards. Clara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It doesn't feel like one. Julian looked at her, not as a CEO, not even as a savior, but as a man watching someone fight to stand upright. Then we'll find the truth, he said quietly. And when we do, they'll regret betting against the woman who saved my mother. Clara stood later by the glass corridor, watching her reflection against the city lights. Behind her, on every glowing screen, headlines scrolled, her name twisted into something she no longer recognized. Yet, in the silence of her own breath, she made a promise, not to prove them wrong, but to survive them. Because she'd done that before, and this time, she wasn't alone. Morning hit the city like a camera flash, sharp, intrusive, impossible to ignore. By 9 a.m., Clara's inbox had exploded. Over 200 messages, journalists, former colleagues, strangers. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Every vibration was another headline, another opinion, another piece of her life being dissected by people who didn't know her at all. Unstable or misunderstood. The woman behind Pierce Global's scandal. Waitress turned director or corporate climber. Screens around the office glowed with the same cruel repetition. In the break room, two employees whispered, She's the one from that story, right? The waitress? Yeah, I heard she had a breakdown once. Guess Julian's philanthropy has new meaning. Clara closed her laptop and walked out before they noticed her. Her reflection in the glass wall caught her mid-stride. A stranger made of nerves and shadows. She'd been humiliated before, but this felt different. This was public, loud, endless. By noon, the board had called an emergency meeting to discuss reputation management. By 2, her apartment building had reporters outside, and by 5, she sat in her office staring at her own trembling hands, unsure whether to cry or scream. Then came a knock. The door opened, and Margaret Pierce stepped in first, followed by Julian. Both looked calm, but their eyes carried the weight of decision. Julian closed the door behind them. You haven't answered my calls. I didn't know what to say. Then let us talk, Margaret said, settling into the chair across from her. Her poise hadn't faltered, even under the storm. Clara looked up, voice hoarse. They're tearing me apart out there. Every article, every comment, it's like deja vu, like the first time I fell, all over again. Margaret nodded slowly. I know. And it's cruel. But it's also not the end. Julian's tone was steady. We've been in crisis meetings all day. The PR team wants to issue a statement, corporate, neutral, carefully worded. Something like, we stand by our employee while we review the facts. Clara laughed, hollow and bitter. That's not a defense, that's a funeral. He sighed. I agree. Margaret leaned forward, her voice softer now. You have two choices, my dear. You can stay silent and let our lawyers handle this quietly. Wait for the noise to die down. Or, Clara asked. Or you can speak, Margaret said. Not as an employee, not as a victim, but as yourself. Tell them who you are before someone else keeps rewriting it for you. Clara froze. A press conference? Julian nodded. We'll arrange it. Our auditorium seats a few hundred, and every major outlet's already watching Pierce Global. You could take back the narrative. Her pulse quickened. And if I fail, if they twist it again, Julian's gaze didn't waver. Then you fail telling the truth, which is still better than succeeding with their lies. Margaret reached for her hand. You've already lived through humiliation once, child. The worst pain is repetition. So stop reliving it. Rewrite it. Clara stared down at their joined hands, her breath shallow. For the first time in years, she realized she wasn't alone in the storm. I'll do it, she whispered. But not as a defense, as a declaration. Margaret smiled faintly, spoken like a Pierce. The next morning, the Pierce Global Auditorium pulsed with cameras, reporters, and restless curiosity. Rows of bright lights lined the ceiling. Every microphone pointed toward a single podium, a small island in a sea of noise. Clara stood behind the curtain, her heart thudding so loudly she thought the sound crew might hear it. Julian approached, voice low. You ready? No, she admitted, but I'm going anyway. He smiled, a mix of pride and quiet fear. That's what courage looks like. Margaret's voice crackled through the intercom. They're ready for you, dear. When Clara stepped out, the lights hit her like a tidal wave. White, blinding, merciless. The room hushed. Dozens of reporters stared, pens poised. She gripped the sides of the podium, grounding herself with the feel of cool metal beneath her palms. Then she looked up and began. My name is Clara Reed, she said, voice trembling once, but only once. And yes, I was a waitress. I'm proud of that. A murmur rippled through the audience. I worked nights because I needed to survive. 3 years ago, I lost everything. My career, my savings, my home. After someone I trusted betrayed me, I was called unstable, unreliable, unfit for my profession. I didn't fight back then, I disappeared, because shame is a convincing liar. She paused. The silence was absolute. But shame doesn't get the final word. Not this time. She met the cameras head on. I'm not here to beg for sympathy. I'm here to tell the truth. I was homeless for months. I slept in my car. I washed dishes for strangers who didn't know my name. And I learned something that no degree, no title, no salary ever taught me. That worth isn't measured by where you fall, but how you rise. Flashes went off, bright and stinging, but she didn't blink. When Mrs. Pierce looked at me that night in the restaurant, I didn't see wealth or power. I saw fear. The same kind I once felt when I thought I had been erased. So I acted. Not because I'm brave, but because I remember what it feels like when no one listens. Her voice steadied, deepened. And now they're saying I don't belong here. That I climbed through connections, not capability. That my past makes me unstable. But here's the truth. My past makes me qualified. I've seen how systems fail people. I've lived it. And that's exactly why I'm here, to help build one that doesn't. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate. Clara took a breath and looked down briefly, then back up. You don't have to believe me. You can keep writing headlines, spinning stories, but I'm done hiding. The truth is simple. She leaned toward the microphones, her tone clear, unwavering. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the clarity to act anyway. The words hung in the air, raw, steady, alive. Someone started clapping, then another, and then the room erupted. Reporters stood, cameras flashed, but for once, the noise wasn't cruel, it was human. That evening, the internet lit up. Clips from the conference went viral. Snippets of her words were shared under a single tag. #courage. Is clarity within hours? Thousands of people, survivors, whistleblowers, working mothers, young women in low-paying jobs, began sharing their own stories under the same hashtag. Margaret watched the trend climb from her tablet, a rare smile curving her lips. It seems the city remembers what integrity sounds like. Julian, beside her, exhaled softly. She just changed everything. Across the city, in a small apartment filled with quiet and light, Clara scrolled through her screen. Messages flooded in. Not hate, but gratitude. She didn't smile, not yet. She just sat there in the glow of her own truth. The silence around her no longer heavy, just still. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from her name. She had spoken it, and the world had listened. The next 48 hours unfolded like the calm after a long storm. A calm that didn't mean silence, but clarity. For the first time in weeks, the headlines had shifted. From victim to visionary, Clara Reed's speech sparks national conversation. Courage is clarity, #movement inspires thousands across the U.S. Pierce Global CEO declares transparency is our true strength. The tide had turned. TV anchors called her the woman who turned vulnerability into power. Morning shows replayed clips of her speech with soft piano music underneath. And by Friday, the board at Pierce Global voted unanimously to expand her pilot program on homelessness into a permanent department, the Human Impact Division. The market responded in kind. Pierce Global's stock climbed 3% overnight. Investors who once doubted the morality initiative now praised it as a masterclass in ethical leadership. And through it all, Clara remained calm, refusing interviews, declining talk shows. She told Julian she wasn't chasing applause. She just wanted quiet. Still, quiet didn't last long. It started that afternoon. Margaret's lawyer called with news, the kind that finally stitched old wounds shut. The police had obtained additional surveillance footage from the Pierce estate, taken by a small camera hidden in the hallway outside Margaret's bedroom. In the grainy black and white video, Vanessa Pierce appeared, elegant as ever, voice raised just out of frame, a slammed door, the sound of a glass shattering. Margaret's muffled cry. Then Vanessa's hand, striking across the light. The clip was only 30 seconds long, but it was enough. The lawyer filed immediately for divorce and a restraining order, citing emotional and physical abuse of a dependent elder. That evening, the news broke across every network. Video evidence confirms abuse allegations against Vanessa Pierce. Legal proceedings underway. Mrs. Pierce thanks Waitress-turned-advisor for saving her life. Vanessa's world collapsed overnight. Her publicist quit. Her accounts were frozen. The same socialites who had once fought for her approval now deleted photos with her name tagged. And as if karma had a schedule to keep, the next blow landed hours later. Derek Vaughn walked into his office at Vaughn and Mercer Advertising the following morning, expecting silence. Instead, he found chaos. Reporters outside, employees whispering, and a young intern refusing to meet his eyes. He opened his laptop and froze. Every major outlet carried the same breaking update. Leaked emails reveal fabricated smear campaign against Clara Reed. Internal correspondence shows Vaughn manipulated former partner's reputation. The leaked messages were undeniable, drafted, time-stamped, attached to fake HR documents, all bearing Derek's name. In one, he'd written, "If we make her look unstable again, she won't dare show her face in this. Industry. I can finish what I started." His investors pulled funding within hours. Clients terminated contracts. His once flashy agency went dark. Derek sat alone at his desk, staring at his reflection in the black computer screen. Somewhere, in the back of his mind, he almost heard Clara's voice from years ago, calm, kind, and disappointed. You could have told the truth. Now, truth had finally told him back. At Pierce Global, the mood was different, lighter, like everyone was breathing for the first time in weeks. Margaret stood beside the window in Julian's office, watching the river glitter under the fading sun. "It's poetic," she murmured. "The truth took its time, but it showed up anyway." Julian smiled faintly. It always does. He turned as Clara stepped in, holding a folder to her chest. Her expression was calm, though her eyes carried the exhaustion of victory. Final approval for the Human Impact Initiative, she said. Housing partnership signed. 3 pilot cities confirmed. Julian took the folder, scanning it quickly. You did this in a week. We did it, Clara corrected. And to be fair, the world helped once they stopped yelling. Margaret chuckled softly. There's a lesson in that somewhere. Julian nodded. Yes, that courage is contagious when it's real. Clara smiled faintly, but said nothing. For the first time, her silence wasn't fear, it was peace. That night, the city hummed below them, lights flickering across the skyline like scattered fireflies. Julian and Clara stood on the balcony of the Pierce penthouse, wind tugging gently at her hair. Below, the river gleamed, endless and quiet. He leaned against the railing beside her, sleeves rolled up, tie abandoned somewhere behind them. You did it, he said quietly. Clara shook her head. No, it did it. What's it? The truth. She exhaled slowly, her voice barely above the wind. I didn't win, Julian. The truth just stopped losing. He looked at her for a long moment, the city's reflection flickering in his gray eyes. Still, he said softly, you gave it a voice. She smiled faintly. I guess we both did. For a while they said nothing. The only sound was the wind against glass, the heartbeat of the city beneath them. Then Julian spoke again, his voice quieter now. You know, when this started, I thought I was saving my mother, but you were saving all of us, in ways I still can't name. Clara turned to him. You're exaggerating. Maybe, he said, smiling, but maybe not. He hesitated, then added, there's something else I wanted to say. Clara tilted her head. Go on. I used to believe transparency was dangerous, that leaders should control the narrative, not expose their flaws. But you showed me the opposite. You proved that the strongest thing a person or a company can do is tell the truth, before someone else does it for them. His tone was quiet, reverent almost. So, I said it this morning, during the board call. Transparency isn't weakness, it's the real kind of power. She smiled. That sounds like a new tagline. He laughed softly. Don't tempt the marketing team. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full, of air, of relief, of things finally said and finally done. Clara leaned against the railing, closing her eyes as the wind brushed past her face. Do you ever wonder, she asked, why some people have to go through hell to find peace? Julian looked out over the skyline. Because peace means more when you've earned it. Their hands brushed. Neither moved away. Below them, Chicago stretched out, bold, flawed, and beautiful. A city of noise learning to listen again. And somewhere, in that wide quiet between them, the truth finally settled. Not as a victory, but as a home. 6 months later, Chicago glowed under spring lights. A city thawing into warmth, reborn in rhythm with the people who had survived its storms. For Clara Reed, the last half year had been nothing short of transformation. What began as a temporary position had evolved into something far larger, the beating heart of Pierce Global's new identity. Under her direction, the Human Impact Division had partnered with over 50 local businesses and shelters. They had secured housing for nearly 1,000 families and funded job training programs for hundreds more. The press called her the human soul of Pierce Global. Clara never grew used to the title, but when she passed the framed headlines in the lobby, from survivor to visionary, the company with a conscience, she couldn't deny how far they'd come. Julian had changed too. The once distant, measured CEO now walked the halls with open sleeves and open smiles. He still commanded every room, but he carried a new kind of authority, the kind that came from humility. They didn't hide their closeness anymore. The press speculated, of course. Colleagues whispered, but both of them kept the same boundary they'd promised, profession first, feelings second. And yet, there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments, when his hand brushed hers in the elevator, or when their eyes met during late meetings and something unspoken passed between them, something deeper than gratitude, something real. That evening, the Pierce Global Annual Gala shimmered beneath the vaulted ceiling of the Riverfront Hall, a ballroom of glass and gold, chandeliers glowing like captured constellations. A live orchestra played soft jazz as the city's elite mingled, politicians, investors, philanthropists. Every camera found Julian and Clara. She wore a simple black gown that seemed made for her, elegant without trying. Her hair was swept up, a few strands framing her face. When she walked through the crowd, people smiled not because of who she stood beside, but because of who she'd become. Julian joined her near the stage, tuxedo impeccable, his usual confidence softened by something gentler. "How are you holding up?" he murmured. "I'm counting how many people are pretending to like each other," she replied, hiding a grin. He chuckled. "Ah, corporate diplomacy, the art of smiling through mild agony." "Exactly. Don't worry," he said. "You only have to endure one more speech." "Whose?" she asked. He only smiled. "You'll see." Half an hour later, as glasses clinked and the orchestra quieted, Julian stepped up to the microphone. The crowd hushed instantly, the magnetic pull of a man everyone knew but few truly understood. "6 months ago," Julian began, his voice smooth and steady, "Pierce Global was a company in crisis. Our reputation was questioned, our integrity fractured, and our purpose forgotten." He paused, glancing across the crowd until his eyes found Clara's. "And then someone reminded us what integrity looks like, not in words, but in action." The room stilled, cameras flashed. She reminded us that transparency isn't a threat, it's the foundation of trust, that courage isn't loud but steady, and that no empire stands taller than the truth it's built upon. Margaret, sitting near the front, smiled proudly, her eyes glistening. Julian lifted a small bouquet of white orchids from the podium, simple, elegant. "So, tonight I want to thank the person who helped me remember why this company existed in the first place. For people, for possibility, for light." He turned toward Clara. "Clara Reed, would you join me?" A soft murmur rippled through the audience. Cameras followed her as she walked toward the stage, the hem of her dress brushing the marble steps. When she reached him, Julian handed her the bouquet. His voice lowered, meant only for her. But the microphones caught the intimacy anyway. "These are for the woman who taught me that empathy builds stronger empires than ambition ever could." Applause erupted, loud, genuine, unrestrained. The orchestra struck a few triumphant notes as Clara, blushing, gave a small nod of thanks. Julian leaned slightly toward her, murmuring, "You were magnificent before tonight. Now the world just caught up." Later, as the crowd drifted out, laughter and champagne filling the air, Clara stepped into the grand lobby of the Pierce Tower. The amber light of the chandeliers bathed everything in gold. It was the same lobby where she had once stood trembling, holding a tray of champagne glasses. The same marble floor where she had first seen Julian, cold and unreadable. And now, it glowed with the warmth of something new. Julian appeared behind her, jacket slung over one shoulder, expression unreadable but eyes steady. "You're quiet," he said. "Just thinking how strange this feels," she replied. "6 months ago, I was polishing glasses in this building. Tonight, I'm changing it," he finished softly. She smiled. "Maybe just a little." He stepped closer, the hum of the empty hall wrapping around them. "Clara." There was something in his tone that made her heart skip, the same tremor she'd felt the first night they spoke in that neon-lit cafe. "I wasn't completely honest earlier," he said. "That speech wasn't just about the company." She frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Julian's lips curved into the faintest smile. "It was about us." Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The movement was so smooth, so unplanned, that she barely realized what was happening until he knelt down, right there, beneath the amber lights of the lobby where it had all begun. The soft gasp of onlookers echoed around them. "Clara Reed," Julian said, voice trembling only once. "You walked into my life when I didn't even realize how broken I was. You taught me that leadership isn't control, that strength isn't silence, and that redemption doesn't happen in boardrooms. It happens in hearts." Her eyes filled instantly. He opened the box. Inside, a ring with a single diamond, modest but luminous, like the city lights reflected on water. "You saved my mother," he said softly. "But you also saved me, not with heroics, with truth, with compassion, with clarity, and I can't imagine my life, or this company, without you in it." He looked up at her. "Will you marry me?" The entire lobby held its breath. Clara pressed her trembling hand to her mouth. The memory of every storm, every humiliation, every sleepless night rushed back like a flood. But now, they didn't hurt. They built toward this moment. She nodded through tears. "Yes." The crowd erupted. Applause, cheers, laughter. Margaret clapped from the mezzanine, shouting something that sounded like, "Finally!" Julian stood, slipping the ring gently onto Clara's finger, and pulled her into his arms as flashes of cameras filled the air. Under the amber light, the same light that once illuminated her fear, Clara now stood radiant, the reflection of a life reclaimed, a love reborn. For the first time in forever, she wasn't running from her past. She was walking, straight into her future, one step, one promise, one heartbeat at a time. A year later, the Chicago River flowed the same way it always had, steady, silver, indifferent. But for Clara Reed, everything around it had changed. The skyline she once viewed as unreachable glass now reflected her own light. The city that had watched her fall now whispered her name with respect. Inside the newly opened headquarters of Pierce Global Foundation, Clara stood before a conference room filled with representatives from nonprofits, corporate leaders, and community activists. Her title read Vice President of Social Impact, but her presence carried something stronger than rank: quiet authority, born of survival. On the large digital screen behind her, the Foundation's newest campaign unfolded. Rebuild Together, a nationwide initiative providing housing, job training, and digital education for displaced families across 12 states. "This isn't just philanthropy," Clara said to the room. "It's investment in humanity. We're not saving people. We're standing beside them." The applause that followed wasn't polite. It was heartfelt. After the meeting, a young intern stopped her in the hall. "Ms. Reed, I saw your speech from last year, the one about courage. It's why I applied here," Clara smiled. "Then that's the best outcome I could have hoped for." The girl hesitated. "How did you stay strong through everything?" Clara's answer was simple. "You don't wait for strength. You move through fear until it becomes it." As the intern walked away, Clara turned toward the window. Outside, the river shimmered in the sunlight, the same river that had mirrored her tears once, now mirroring her calm. Across the city, Margaret Pierce adjusted the microphone on a podium, bearing the seal of the National Elder Rights Council. At 71, she'd retired from the board, but not from her purpose. "Silence is not dignity," she told the crowded auditorium, "and fear is not loyalty. If I learned anything from the woman who saved me, it's that asking for help is not weakness. It's courage in disguise." The audience rose to their feet in applause. Somewhere near the back, a sign read, "End elder abuse. Speak before it's too late." When the conference ended, a journalist approached her. "Mrs. Pierce, what inspired you to dedicate this chapter of your life to advocacy?" Margaret smiled, the lines on her face catching the light. "A waitress who refused to stay invisible. Far away, under a washed-out California sky, Vanessa Pierce lived behind closed blinds. Her mansion, once filled with glittering guests and cameras, now echoed with silence. The tabloids had long moved on, but the internet never forgot. Her name appeared in footnotes of cautionary tales, the fall of a socialite. She rarely left the house, avoiding mirrors, interviews, and invitations. Every so often, she would scroll through photos of her old life, jewels, galas, magazine, covers, and stop when she reached one image, her former mother-in-law smiling beside Clara. Vanessa would stare at that photo until her eyes blurred, whispering to no one, "I could have been different," but she never hit delete. Meanwhile, Derek Vaughn faced his own reckoning. After the smear campaign collapsed, investigators had turned their attention to his company's finances. What they found made headlines again: falsified contracts, tax evasion, embezzlement. The trial was swift. On the stand, Derek looked thinner, older. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he hesitated, then murmured, "Tell her. Tell Clara she was right." But Clara never attended the trial. She didn't need to. Some stories end themselves. By summer, Pierce Global Foundation had grown into a model of ethical reform, proof that profit and compassion could coexist. And as the year turned, so did the chapter of two lives intertwined by fate. The wedding was small, just as Clara wanted. No press, no extravagance. Only people who had seen the worst of them both, and still believed in the best. It took place by the Chicago River, near the pier where Julian's father once built the first shipment docks of their family company. Fairy lights draped over the trees, the soft murmur of water beneath them. The guests sat on simple white chairs, some of them former shelter residents, program beneficiaries, employees who had rebuilt their own lives under Clara's wing. Margaret officiated, her voice clear and joyful. "Two souls met in a storm," she said, smiling through tears, "and found not perfection, but peace." Clara's gown was modest, ivory silk that caught the sunset like a whisper. Julian stood in a dark blue suit, his tie loose, his expression undone. When he spoke his vows, his voice trembled only once. "I thought strength meant never needing anyone," he said, "but you taught me that true strength is standing with someone, not above them." He took her hands, eyes glistening. "You didn't just save my mother, Clara. You saved the part of me I thought success had killed." Clara's tears fell freely, though her smile was steady. "And you," she said softly, "taught me that not every powerful man is cruel, that sometimes power can heal when it learns to listen." Margaret's laughter mixed with the sound of waves. "Now that," she declared, "is a marriage built on mutual disobedience." Everyone laughed, the kind of laughter that came from relief. They exchanged rings, kissed beneath the amber glow of dusk, and the applause rolled like river water against the shore. Hours later, as night wrapped the city in silver, the guests departed. The lights dimmed, the music faded. Clara and Julian stayed by the riverbank, standing side by side under the lanterns, swaying gently in the breeze. The Chicago skyline shimmered across the dark water, reflections trembling like heartbeats. Julian slipped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "You realize," he murmured, "this is where it all started. The river, the lights, even that first storm." Clara nodded, resting her head against his chest. "And we survived it." He looked down at her. "We did more than survive." She smiled. "We built something from it." Julian was quiet for a long time, the sound of the water filling the spaces between their words. Then he whispered, "You didn't just save my mother that night." She looked up, curious. "You saved the part of me that believed people could still be good," he said softly. "The part I thought I'd buried under titles and meetings and numbers." Clara reached up, brushing his cheek. "You always had it, Julian. You just needed someone to remind you it was still there." They stood there, bathed in golden reflection, the city pulsing behind them like a living heartbeat. The wind carried the scent of lilacs and river air. Somewhere in the distance, church bells marked midnight. Clara exhaled, slow, content, free. 1 year ago, she had stood on these same banks afraid of her past. Now she stood unafraid of her future. Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead, his voice a whisper against the hum of the city. "To freedom," he said. She smiled. "To justice." He looked into her eyes. "And to love." Their fingers intertwined, a promise sealed not by wealth nor words, but by the quiet certainty of two people who had seen the dark and still chosen the light. The camera would pull back now, the river glowing, the skyline glistening, their silhouettes framed in soft gold, until they became part of the city's heartbeat. And above the steady murmur of the water, the night carried their story onward, a story of truth, rebirth, and love that finally, fully belonged to them.